Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good morning. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. It's the 11th of February. We are nearly at the halfway point of the whole school year, which is very exciting. You are listening to The Morning Break, and I am very, very privileged to be able to welcome a guest on our show this week. I have known this guest for as long as I've been a teacher. We trained together in the antediluvian times of 2005, when the educational landscape looked somewhat different to classrooms and expectations of today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Matt. Over 20 years, Matt has worked in a variety of educational settings, including some challenging environments, like joining a school in special measures, which saw improvements from 4 to 14% of A and A star grades over 2 years, which is pretty impressive. And as well as some more affluent areas where expectation seems to be naturally expected, but we often see a little bit of a plague of apathy and entitlement in those areas. Matt has lectured at master's level on organisational cultures, sharing his expertise beyond the classroom. And this year, Matt made the jump into the independent sector for the first time, where he is leading the English department in both IGCSE and International Baccalaureate courses. But most importantly of all, he would like you to know that he has a black belt in Teach Meets. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Tell me, how does one get a black belt in Teach Meets?
You force a black belt on people. I know this conversation came out from the Fads episode of Teachers Talk Radio, and kind of I know lots of listeners will probably remember sort of 10ish years ago, where unless you'd been to a Teach Meet, you couldn't possibly be part of a CPD program, and yeah, just that opportunity to both listen and share. Wherever there was one happening, I'd be there. If they wouldn't let me talk, I'd listen. And I think, yeah, that sort of, yeah, like I say, it's lots of stuff that kind of that still sort of echoes in my teaching now, even though those days of having spare time to do that sort of thing, like action research and all those sorts of things, seems to be a bit of a waning kind of waning thing.
I think that's part of the changes that we've seen, haven't we, in education over all this time? Because I mean, this all started, like you say, with the Fads and Fashions episode that we talked about in teaching a couple of months ago, and then we had a kind of pre-chat between Christmas and New Year about this, like just talking pedagogy basically for an hour and a half while Matt was on a train journey, and we have moved to a place in education, haven't we, where things are so different to what they used to be. Yeah, you know, when we trained 20 years ago, what's happened?
Well, I think it's difficult because I think everything looks quite different. And I think this is the whole nature of the faddy things. I think everything looks quite different, but everything's still essentially the same. You know, funny enough, I was talking to year 11 just before coming here, and you know, you look at the curriculum on paper, and it actually hasn't changed since our year 11's parents were doing Macbeth, Of Mice and Men, In Spectacles, Christmas Carol, you know, those How Does the Writer, all of that kind of thing. And yet, in the time we've been teaching, the way we've tried to teach all of those things that have existed for 100 years or more is on a constant rotation as we desperately trying to somehow work out an answer of how to do this best, easiest, more efficiently. I don't know. Yeah. So I think, I think like everything's changed, but actually nothing's changed in the time I've been a teacher, which just seems really strange.
It is, like you say, there's a bit of a dichotomy there, isn't there, between like everything being exactly the same, but what's been expected of us has changed so significantly, and how like the needs that we cater for, how frequently we're catering for those needs, how we deliver things, how we understand metacognition and cognitive function and everything, and so even though the content is the same, the delivery is not
absolutely
the same.
And I think
our
sort
time
of,
isn't the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sort of we talk constantly about the kind of like what the Ken Robinson video, the idea that children are taught in rows, you know, that very didactic form of classrooms and things like that. And it's you know, we do group work, we do all of these learning styles, but actually what we often don't do is look at the content of our curriculum. You know, the sort of actually, you know, we've learned so much about learning, the internet and AI have arrived. You know, we've adjusted our attitudes to all forms of humanity, particularly over the past 10 years, with Me Too, with Black Lives Matter and all of that sort of thing. And yet nobody's actually sat down and thought, do we really, you know, is all of this still relevant? And do we need to shift our thinking in this way?
And I think like we had the white paper, didn't we, a little while back about, you know, proposed changes to education, and there have been some sensible proposals in there, I think, but I don't think it goes far enough. I don't think there's any recognition of how much life has changed.
No, absolutely. And I also think there's sort of the whole nature of expectation of sort of the sort of we're here for us, and I think it applies to teachers as well, is in as much as obviously I'm sort of in Wales at the moment, and the WJC is unrecognisable to what it was last year in terms of the specifications, and yet so many schools have gone, right, new GCSE, so many Welsh, so many female, so many like you know, sort of black authors, but we've still got a shelf of Inspector Calls.
Yeah.
You know, Christmas Carol's only 99p a copy, and I've already got a unit of work on this. You know, I can recite Of Mice and Men quotes to the, and so we stay within our comfort zone for varying reasons. You know, the demands of our time, you know, our want to do well by the pupils, and so we don't expect enough of ourselves, maybe in terms of challenge. You know, we talk about sort of moving the kids outside of their comfort zone all the time, and yet we've only just shifted Of Mice and Men. We've only just, you know, and so yeah, I don't know. And that's why I think the IB is such an exciting qualification, is, you know, this opportunity to move and shift based on the pupils in front of you, I think is brilliant. And it's made me push myself as well, which I think is really important. I
think what you said about our time is really kind of crucial in terms of why we don't push ourselves, because there are so many demands put on our time, and that's increased with the number of things that we've been asked to take charge of and be responsible for, and the admin.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the time and money, you know, I've done nearly 20 years, and I know that the ridiculous time of kind of Lado, sort of, you have a free in the middle of the day, and sometimes that free is used just sitting and coming up for air. You know, you can't do anything meaningful because the first two lessons have been wild. So it's kind of, I totally appreciate that why teachers will instantly go, yeah, I'll 100% teach that, because I don't need that extra headspace, which kind of comes back to this idea of the expectations in the classroom, I suppose. This idea that sort of that what we have on an hour by hour basis for give or take 10 minutes in terms of your school it's wild. You know, it's sort of the way the demands that are put on us cognitively to manage 30-ish pupils on an hour by hour basis. It's exhausting.
It is
And
exhausting.
I think I don't think it's as exhausting for the kids as it is for us, which I think is what comes back to this shift in expectation. Is I don't think the pupils expect enough of themselves.
And that's obviously what you are here to talk about. You are a champion of expectation being absolutely everything in a classroom.
100%.
Like that's
100%.
what we should be doing. And I think we've reached this really odd place in education now where I think the exam expectations are incredibly high, probably too high in what we're expecting young people to achieve for 100% of their grade in an hour and a half.
Yeah,
like
I mean, regardless
it's a
of
lot.
what the media, they're definitely harder than when I was at school. They're definitely harder than when I started teaching. Like, you know, the idea that they're getting progressively easier is simply not the case. Okay?
No, absolutely not. But yeah, on a day-to-day basis, our expectations are very low, I think.
Yeah,
and they've moved lower and lower and lower. What happened? Why are we here?
I think it's come from the right place. It's come from the well-meaning place that kind of we want our pupils to do well. We want our pupils to feel empowered. We want our pupils to feel safe in our care. And I think we've desperately tried to say, if you do this, then this will be easy. If you do this, this will be easy. You know, analysis. It's near the top of Bloom's taxonomy. It's a difficult skill, and I think rather than acknowledging that, we've gone, oh, it's fine. If you put it into this table before you write an essay, it's going to be really easy. You know, like PEE, for example, my nemesis of PEE, because. And I remember when I started teaching, like you'd have it in a table, your point, your evidence, your analysis. And if a kid understood analysis, they'd do their table and it'd basically be an essay in table form. If a pupil couldn't do PE, then their table was a repetitive nature of, and then they couldn't do their essay. So it served no purpose. And as soon as a kid understands how to do PE, the whole thing becomes redundant. So it actually serves nobody. And so, and there's lots of formats like that. And the pupils and teachers love the idea that there's a formula to stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and sort of the amount of even like A-level and or IB and things like that. Sir, can we do PEE for these paragraphs? Can we do petal? I had a pupil in a plan the other day, and he's going to get the highest grade. Do potato.
I've not heard of some of these.
P-E-A-T-E-A-T-A-L. Potato.
I've never heard of that.
No, it's absolutely. I'd seen it, and tap tag and potato and petal and Peter and it's just analysis. It's just analysis. And you get analysis by saying, yes, this is tough. This is tricky. This is the highest level stuff. So let's practice this together. What is the author telling us? You know, let's write this together. You know, this person's got it. Let's have a look at their work. Do you mind if we should pop this under the visualizer, Fad? You know, it's kind of an old, you know, let's pop this under the visualizer. Let's do an I do, you do, we do, Fad. But let's model these things. Let's write it together so you can see this process.
Yeah.
You know, and it's something that my next step, the one that I haven't been brave enough to do yet, is getting pupils to the brightest, the ones that are able, is to live write it under a visualizer and vocalize. If you ever see, you know, the other side of, they will talk you through their thinking, because they'll explain it much better than you will, because they're on a level with the kids. And I think just this idea of witnessing their struggle, you know, the idea that everything at the top end is difficult, and that's a good thing, you know.
That's such a good
not
idea.
feeling good enough, and the kids in my care, the kids in my lessons will sing never enough at any given point. I'll never be happy in my lessons, because not feeling good enough is a superpower. Knowing that this isn't perfect is the best thing in the world.
You're
But what
constantly
are you,
striving.
yes, exactly. But what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
Sir, I'm done. Okay, well done. Is it any good? Well, I don't know. Well, go and have a look then. You know,
Yeah,
I'm not looking.
That's my line as a teacher. That's where I feel like I get really frustrated with the I'm done.
Yeah.
But are you done? Are
Yeah,
you done?
yeah,
Unless it's grade 9 quality at this
Yeah,
point,
you're not done.
you're
Exactly.
not done. There is always
Absolutely.
something more to be done. And
Absolutely.
I feel, and I've always struggled with the whole I only need to get a kind
Yeah.
of conversation as well. Well, I only need to get a 4. Or in the old days, well, I only need to get a C. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, why aren't you striving for more? Why
Yeah,
do you have to stop
absolutely.
at a C? Why, when you could get an A, are you not thinking?
I
could get
totally
an A?
agree. Like, you know, nobody ever goes 1-0 up in a football game and thinks, tell you what, gents, we'll leave it there. We've won. We'll take the 3 points. Let's, you know, it's that sort of thing. Nobody's, and it's the same. That nature of expectation exists in lots of other places.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it often doesn't exist in the classroom.
Yeah.
And you know, sort of there's lots of little theories. There's lots of little things out there that have these kind of things. I know, sort of, like, one of my favourite things of recent years at Tom Sherrington's walkthroughs and everyone else's walkthroughs, and the phrase of kind of like say it again better. This idea if you kind of, it starts at a very, very low level of can you answer this verbally in a sentence, rather than a word. But then sometimes a kid will give an answer and go, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. Or how would that sound? You're totally right. But would that sound any different if it was written down? You know, how are you going to refine that so it's written down? You know, and that sort of thing. You know, sort of that idea that encouraging pupils to articulate themselves properly at all times.
And that's kind of what the turn and talk fad is kind of encouraging, isn't it? It's that idea that articulate it first, try and get the idea in your head, then try and commit it to the page, because you've ordered your thoughts. And I'm a bit like that as well. Like I when I'm teaching something new for the first time, normally when I've read through it and then I start to teach it, I'm a little bit unsure and I'm like, oh, I think I've got this. But as soon as I've then started to teach it and I've had to explain it to somebody else, I'm like, oh, hold on a minute, I do get this.
Exactly. And it's the same, like sort of like the even things as simple as things like questioning. It's like it's a really thing sort of that I've talked with kind of trainee teachers about, is this idea of why are you asking this question?
Yeah.
You know, there will be, you know, you question for behavior management sometimes, you know, you question sometimes just for prior recall for a kid who wasn't in or something, but you will also, 90% of the time, hopefully, you are genuinely interested in the answer. And if you ask a question, this hands down policy, and again, this low expectation, hands down policy, it exists because if I'm asking you a question, I want your answer.
Yeah.
Because I will ask a different question to a different pupil. You know, it's
because
kind
you're
of
tailoring it.
yeah, because you're tailoring it, because I want to know your answer. And you know, yes, it might be quite terrifying for me to come to you for that question, but I'm coming to you anyway. And if the answer is I don't know, you go, okay, that's cool. Let's unpick that slightly. You know, let me adjust.
Yeah, you ask your follow-up questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of, I quite like the phrase, oh, maybe I've explained that badly. You know, if I've come to you and the shutters have gone up and you're terrified, then I'll pretend that I've made the mistake, and I'll ask you a slightly simpler question. And I'll, you know, but the idea that you will go, I don't know, and I'll go, okay, and I'll ask somebody else. That's not a thing. That's not an expectation of mine. If I'm coming to you for a question, then you're going to input in this lesson, because your input is valuable to me, and your input is valuable to everyone else. You know,
And I
'cause
think
that
I don't know, that kind of learned helplessness, that what do they call it? Learned incompetence or whatever, like that has, I'm seeing that kind of permeate through. And it's this idea that if I don't bring a pen, or if I tell you that I don't know something, or I don't know how to start, or we've got these I'm thinking these standard kind of get out clauses effectively that they resort to, because they think, well, it will just be passed on to somebody else. Nobody's going to hold me accountable. It is that accountability for their learning.
And in schools across the UK, if you have produced a bit of work, then we're game on for the lesson. The teacher comes round if they've got time. They see you've knocked out a page of work. You might get a merit if you've written a whole page of writing. But is it any good?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is it any good? You know,
have we lost some pride, do you think, in that? Is it a societal thing? Because are we fighting a little bit of a rising tide of societal low expectations, do you think?
Yes, I don't think it's pride, because I think, and I say this often, this is one of my wonderful interview responses when going for jobs and things, is there are no kids that don't want to do well. I don't believe that for a moment. I think kids want to do well, but I think rather than it being a societal lowering of bar, I think it comes back, the expectation is things are easy, that there is a secret formula to write an A star or a grade 9 essay. You know, you can use these words, you can use these signposts or scaffolds in order to do that. And I think the nature of, in order to be an expert at something, it requires a lot of hard work.
It does.
You know, and if I'm asking you to do more work, it's not because I think you're stupid. It's because, well, hard work's going to make you better.
Yeah.
And you look around at the pupils who do it brilliantly. They're reading, they're listening to podcasts, they're having these big conversations.
They're committing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a move away from, and I know he's on the show next week. I know Michael Gove, that had enough of experts, I think is such a dangerous way to go, because if you're not going to value an expert, where are your values?
Yeah, where do we go?
Where do we go?
Yeah.
Because, you know, if somebody needs to know something about literature, they can come to me. I've read a lot, I've talked a lot, you know, I've had a lot of discussions. I can probably all point you in the right direction. If somebody wants to know something about a post-Brexit economy, don't come to me. I've got no idea. Go to somebody who knows, you know, and there are lots of scenarios like that where you can take advice from somebody. They'll give you their opinion, but it's a really ill-informed one.
Yeah.
And I think that exists everywhere. And so I think that that idea that hard work is something that we're not valuing as much. We want to be seen to find things easy. You know, the act of challenging yourself is not a thing. You know, I ask a question, somebody puts their hands up, go, the answer's this, and I go, yes, have a gold star. Next.
Yeah.
As opposed to going, okay, you've answered that question. Well, let's unpick that. And one of my IB's students was talking about this topic, and again, it sort of gave me rise to our conversation at Christmas, is if you don't know in certain classrooms, in certain environments, in certain sort of educational cultures, if you don't know the answer to a question, that's a problem. You're not good enough, you're stupid. Whereas actually, to a certain extent, the opposite is true. If you've been given a question that you know the answer to straight away, was that the right question for you? You know, if I've asked you a question and you can't answer it straight away without at least some thought, with some pause after my bounce fad, is why have I asked that question to you? It hasn't challenged you, it hasn't pushed you, it hasn't moved you, out of your comfort zone in any way, shape, or form. So what's the point of the question? Did I ask you for behaviour management? Did I ask you just for a bit of recall? Or was it meant to be a genuine question? Yeah, tick box. Yeah. Or was it meant to be a genuine question? Because if it's a genuine question, then pose, pause, pounce, bounce, fad, becomes really important. You know, and that's where the thinking time. And I think this idea, and I quite like it's one of my favourite starter activities. Can I call a starter activity a fad? But like the idea of kind of, why not? Just did the this idea that I will arrive and I will be setting up the PowerPoint and go, right, the first question I'm going to ask the class is, you've got about a minute.
Thinking time.
And that's my starter activity. It's not handing out little sheets of paper that will be falling out of their book for the next 6 weeks. It's not an engaging word activity on the PowerPoint that I can't get working. It's as I walk in, the question that I'm going to ask you is this. Nobody knows who it's coming to, but you've got a minute to formulate an answer.
But that helps them to be accountable for that, doesn't it? Because
100%.
You've all had the time to think about it.
100%. And you kind of, and you come to ex-pupil and they still don't have their anthology open. And you're like, and you're so, okay, well, you're not ready. Okay, I can see you're not ready. I'm going to go to this person, but I'm coming back to you. So you've A, got to get your anthology open, but B, you need to be listening. You're now doing two things. You know, the lesson has started and you haven't. This is a problem. I come back to you again. If your anthology is still not open, then it becomes a real problem. Because right now you're dropping behind. And again, the case in point of the school I'm at the moment is I told them, I put together, we're going to be studying this poem from the anthology, this text from the anthology, next lesson. And I came to the next lesson. It was only about the third lesson that I've been teaching this class. And they opened their anthology of this text. And one of the boys looked at his peer's book and was like, oh my God, we didn't do this poem, or did this text last lesson. How come you've got so many notes? And his mate was like, well, sir told us we were going to do it. Have you not read it? And he was like, oh, he didn't tell us to. And he was like, no. And this pupil noticed, he looked around, and of a class of, I think it was a class of about 11, 12 pupils, only 2 of them hadn't done the pre-read, hadn't made notes on this text.
That's amazing.
It was incredible. And this pupil suddenly went, sir, I haven't got any notes on this. Is that okay? And the answer is simple. Well, it's okay, but you're behind everyone else. Your contributions might not be as valuable. And he said, well, can I make more notes after the lesson? Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can. But the expectation was on him to do so.
Yeah.
And I know, and I think if I'd have been listening to this even as much as 12 months ago, before my career shift, it's very easy to dismiss this as a sort of as a private sort of state thing. But how many videos do all pupils watch on any given day? How the duration of TikTok swiping of whatever? Yeah, they've all got access to YouTube. This is YouTube isn't the privilege of the wealthy. It isn't. And I know it's not as simple as that there's cultural capital, there's parental expectations, things, but actually every single pupil can go onto YouTube and type in GCSE, AQA, in spectacles, revision. Yeah. They can all do that. And instead of watching, somebody unboxing a whatever, some makeup,
Yeah.
they can watch or listen to
Yeah.
somebody talking through a text. There's no reason that anyone can't do that.
I agree, but I find they suddenly decide to do that a week before the exams when they want to
100%.
dismiss everything that I've told them over the last 2 years because
Yeah.
that's not valuable at all.
Yeah.
I haven't invested anything in them at all.
Yeah.
A week before the exam, someone on YouTube can give them all the information that they need to get their grade 9. And
This
I'm
has
like,
existed for years. Yeah, this has existed for the whole time you've been studying this. And no, you can't watch it all in an evening, and that's not how the brain works. And yeah, precisely, absolutely.
I'm going to pause just for a second because I'm so invested in this, and I'm going to easily forget to put a shout out to our sponsors. So our sponsors are Hachette Learning. This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles. And coming up in the next month, we have Teachers Talk Connect. It's back. It's our annual CPD and networking extravaganza. Where have I got that way from? Extravaganza. Join the TTR team on Saturday the 14th of March in Manchester. Tickets are free. So what are you waiting for? Head over to ttradio.org/connect 2026. Sorry, Matt, I interrupted you right in the middle of you talking about these the YouTube videos. I mean, I think so. You're talking about kind of cultural capital and everything. I work in an affluent area, but I work in a state school in an affluent area. My year 11 classes, I have 2 year 11 classes. We relatively regularly set flipped learning homework where they go away, they read the articles, they do the preparation, whatever, and then we come in and the expectation is that they have done that. And so unlike the situation where you just mentioned it and the students took the initiative to do it, this was set as an official homework, or this is set as an official homework, and half my class are not doing it. Half of them are not doing it, even though they're told. So even though, you know, the student in your class said, oh yeah, but Sir didn't tell us to, even in situations where, no, you were explicitly told to do that, and you have chosen not to do that because what you want is for me to give you the answers. That's what you want because that's easier. Because we have got to a place, I think, I saw a post about this a little while ago, where we've reached a stage where people can't feel any form of discomfort. Like any form of discomfort is seen as a negative. And life is full of discomfort. It is, like, you are going to feel uncomfortable, like going to a job interview. I don't love job interviews. I hate job interviews. They make me feel sick to my stomach. But if I want to get a promotion, if I want to move to a different place, if I want to earn money, I'm going to have to go through that process, as uncomfortable as it is. And I wonder if some of this is down to that idea of, like you were saying, you have to struggle to get better. You have to fall into the pit.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And I can't remember where I heard this, but there was somebody talking about this quite recently, of this idea, and it's a really interesting thing for me to think of as an adult as well. Of, you know, there was a point where I couldn't put my trousers on by myself. You know, it was a long time ago, but it existed, and I've learned, and now I'm brilliant at it. You know, there were points where I couldn't read, and I went through a process, you know, again, of what, 5, 6, 7, and you know, you're not fully developed, maybe in my late teens or early 20s as a reader, and that was fine. So the process of not being able to do something to being able to do something it's a process. At what age do we shy away from that process? Because as a child, moving from not being able to do something to being able to do something, you do that all the time because you start as a blank slate. And I think it's coming back to your flipped learning thing, I'll say fat because you didn't.
Sorry, I forgot.
No, it's all right. But coming back to the flipped learning thing, is it doesn't rely on an individual. I think this is the key thing. It relies on a culture of I haven't, since I've been here, I haven't read out loud in a class our class reader yet.
Wow.
Because just read it. Just read it. Like, because if we think about coming back to this idea that, you know, our time is valuable, is think about all the expertise you have as an educator, and you have, let's say, what, 3 hours a week with your pupils. If you take an hour of at least an hour of those 3 reading chapter 4 of Mice and Men, what a waste.
Yeah, you're so right.
What a waste. And, you know, audiobook it. I'm not bothered. Audiobook it. You know, arrive with the plot, and arrive with the plot, and we'll do the rest. But that passive act of reading.
Yeah.
And again, horses for courses. There will be classes that you will read it with them, and you'll pause and you'll chat, and that's a very, very valuable thing. But for most kids, if you send them away and say, can you read this chapter of this text, the chances are they will be able to. It might be tricky, but they will be able to. You know, we pick our texts relevant to that, don't we? We pick our texts that are accessible to our pupils, but then we don't actually encourage them to access them independently. And I haven't, and I can.
So true.
But I know that even at A level, in every other school I've worked in, I couldn't ask pupils to do that, because there'd be a 50-50 split.
And that's,
you know, years and years ago now, in quite an affluent school, I had a young man, a year 13, who used to boast that he'd written his A-level coursework on, I wasn't his teacher at the time, but it was 1984 and something else. And he said that 1984, and he was giving people advice on coursework, that 1984 is a brilliant text because there is so much stuff on the internet that you don't even have to read it. You don't have to read it all the way through. And I remember calling him out on it. And I was saying, like, regardless of your grade, the idea that you've made it to year 13 of a literature student and you haven't read 1984 yet is shameful.
And it's also, you've chosen it at this point.
And you've chosen it as a subject. You've chosen it as a subject. You get free reign, and I don't know what the AQA level is, but the WJCA level, you can choose, as long as it's one pre, one post 2000, you can choose any work of literature in the world, as long as it's pre and post 2000. And just the idea of, and again, that I've been in schools where Langlit pupils have come to the teacher and said, I think the amount of reading that you're expecting us to do is unrealistic. And it's like, you know, like, look, Jane Eyre is nearly 300 pages long. And it's like, yes, but we gave you the reading list before the summer. Three of these pupils, they read it before the reading list. They've reread it before the summer. They know this book by the back of the hand, so they don't need to properly reread it again, because they've been really excited about studying Jane Eyre. Because their expectation of a literature course is that you read. Yeah, is that you read. Exactly, absolutely.
It's not shocking.
It's not shocking, no. But then, like, you shift the shift to IB, so the expected, to give you an idea of the difference in expectation. The IB course so there's SL and HL, like standard level and high level. The expected text coverage of IB pupils is they'll have studied between 7 and 10 literary texts over 2 years, and a HL student will have done up to 15.
Yeah.
We're
Wow.
February of year 12, February half term, and my HL students have done Persepolis, Antigone, Macbeth, Gatsby. We've also done Thelma and Louise and Barbie as our non-literary text, Malcolm X, Wilfred Owen and Banksy.
Wow.
And we started in September.
Wow. Wow. Like, honestly, I mean, you must remember this, but the conversations that I have with year 11 students about, we have to know 18 poems. Don't you think that's too much? And my response is, do you know the words to 18 songs? They're like, oh yeah, probably. And I'm like, then 18 poems.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same
thing. It's not that different.
And also, not all of the not all of the texts. And this is the other thing in terms of expectation, is not all of these texts they'll utilize in the exams. You know, a lot of them won't ever get assessed on, but actually that's not why we came into teaching. You know, don't get me wrong, I'm going to get the kids the best grades they could, but actually literature is brilliant. It takes you so far out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You know,
and you learn about things that you wouldn't otherwise learn. Like, that's what I had a conversation with one of my year 10s yesterday. Bless him, at the end of the lesson he walked over to the canteen with me talking about literature. And this is not a grade 9 student. This is a student who does have quite significant levels of struggling and struggles to engage. But the conversation I had with him about literature, I was like, he was saying, isn't it interesting, miss? Like, you can think something different to somebody else about it, but even though you've read the same thing. And I was like, but that's it. That's the beauty of literature. That's amazing. And that's why I've been a teacher for so long, because I can teach Macbeth every single year, but I can guarantee that at least one person is going to say something or have a viewpoint that I've never ever heard before.
And that's why I don't annotate my copy of the anthology. Is because when I put a poem on the board, we are not playing guess what's in Sir's anthology. We're not playing that. We're saying where are the poignant moments of this poem to you? You know, that if the number of children or the number of young people who are terrified of unseen poetry. Yeah. Every poem should be an unseen poem when it's
my colleague argues exactly that. She's like, we should treat all the anthology poems we should treat as unseen every single time.
100%. And you can fill in gaps and teach them things. It's sort of your job,
of course.
You know, and that's where sort of, you know, terminology comes in. Like you said, well, this is. I'm really glad you've picked that up, because that's a thing called juxtaposition.
Yeah.
What effect does it have? You know, and we also see juxtaposition in these things and that kind of thing. And you can kind of, and there's, you know, you give them guidance. Where's the light? Where's the weather? Whose perspective is it from?
Yeah, it's all through your questioning, isn't it?
It's all through your questioning. It's all through your questioning. Absolutely. You know, and you start from this person. Can you find me a word that shows that this poem is meant to be scary?
Yeah.
Can you find a tonal shift in this poem?
Yeah.
You know, who can tell me what a simile is? Where's the, you know, and you slowly build like that. You know, it's that sort of thing. But yeah, but it all comes down to what are you doing? What are you doing? Because you don't get, you know, your young lad with his creative interpretations, you know, grade 9 skill, is he doesn't get that if you put all of your annotations up on the board, and they'll sit in silence. And they sit in silence,
passively ingest,
and you underline and say, you underline a thing, goes, what's that? Somebody shouts simile, and you go, yes, it is. And then what's that? The same kid shouts alliteration, yes, it is. and you're basically there's 2 or 3 kids just shouting.
Dominating.
Yeah, absolutely. The classroom could be silent, and this is another thing of when we talk about expectations, it's very little on the surface to do with behavior, because it is, I don't want to say it's easy, it's not easy to get a classroom silent, but there are many strategies to get a classroom silent and working, and it's often the least productive way to run a classroom. If in doubt, copy out.
Yeah,
Guys,
so true.
sit down. Can we get? How are you going to get this rowdy class? How am I going to get them in and learning? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is the first 10 minutes is a title, a date, and a learning objective gets done in silence. And it's kind of, and then they're all nice and passive, so you can tell them what you think about whatever.
So true. That's
Yeah.
so true. And I think we've really settled into that since COVID as well, because teaching became so one way. Because I feel there was such a massive shift, and I went on maternity leave just before COVID as well. So I went on maternity leave. Everything was kind of normal. We were very focused on group work and student independence, and everything had been handed over to the students, and there was minimal teacher talk. And then I came back after maternity leave into COVID and online learning and everything. And the shift, it was like I was coming into a completely different job, because it was so teacher at the front, didactic learning.
I think that COVID drove such a massive wedge between the nature of privilege and expectations at home, because I was talking to, again, I was in, I shifted jobs in the Easter that everything closed down, and I ended up doing some work with my previous school, because the debaters wanted to debate online. So I worked with some kids from my previous school, which was quite affluent, with the pupils who are sort of who are less affluent. And on the one hand, I was doing I was literally, so the work was on online. If the pupils did it or not was neither here nor there, because we were ringing around to make sure the safeguarding sort of things, because these pupils were very vulnerable. So the priority was these pupils were safe. We're doing some things. What you up to? That sort of thing. Whereas I then switched to my previous school, and I had year 11 pupils were doing philosophy modules with the Open University just because that's what they wanted to do.
Wow.
And they had that opportunity. And I think that cultural expectation, when you've not got, we all have, culturally, lots of schools say they have high expectations. As soon as you take the school out of that, the expectations then become really important. And that comes back to, like I say, not about behavior, not entirely about you. The pupils' expectations is not my job. It comes back to this 3 hours a week. I see most of my pupils for 3 hours a week. And so some 4, some 2, but that's not enough. It's not enough for them to be excellent literary scholars. So the question is, and again, this reminds me of, I saw Damien Duff, the Irish footballer, on Instagram, of talking about the football season. And the football season is this, but you've got to touch a ball. If you're only going to train during the football season, during your training sessions, then you're not going to be world class. You've got to touch a ball against the wall. You've got to live and breathe it. And if you're going to be good at English, 3 hours isn't enough. What book have you got in your bag? What podcast are you listening to? Because when you come to go to the best, this one, hopefully this one, I'm on it. You listen. Talking about you. but yeah, sort of yeah. When are you doing this? You know, if you're a math scholar, you know, what interesting stuff are you working on? You know, do you know how to do calculus even though it's not on the curriculum?
Yeah.
You know, have you, like 1984? I've never taught 1984 explicitly, but all the best kids arrive at me having read it. Because they know that 3 hours isn't enough, because their expectation of theirs, you're off, send me an email for the slides, catch up the notes. What?
How do we foster that, do you think? How do we? Because I feel like I had a conversation with one of my year 11s the other day, and he was like, Miss, I don't need to pass my GCSEs because I'm going to be an entrepreneur. That's what he told me. And I said, okay. I said, and he went, well, loads of people have done it. And I said, but do you know what the thing is that's really important? Even if you're going to be an entrepreneur, even if you're not going to pass your GCSEs, you have to have work ethic. You have to want it. You have to work so hard to build a business and build a successful business.
What do you do when you don't know what to do? It's a wonderful phrase. It's in my previous school, we marked on agency, and I think it's a really interesting thing. What do you do when you don't know what to do? Because a lot of pupils are in that position. They feel like they don't know what to do, and therefore they don't do it. It's a fear thing.
Yeah.
It's a fear. And I think it comes right back to this in terms of how do you target this, or how do you foster this? It comes back to this nature of risk. It comes back to the phrase that all of my kids are sick of hearing: I want to see you struggle. And whether that's in, you know, in your dirt work in your book, Fad, you know, whether it's, you know, say it again better, you know, whether it's asking me for extra reading, whether it's, but I want to see you find things difficult, because if you're not finding things difficult, I'm not doing my job well enough. It's, you know, and there are a tremendous number, and it comes right back to the start of my teaching career, of a girl who, and it's so weird to have this one genius of my entire career. And we were doing heroes in year 7 scheme of work, and they'd been asked to bring in a hero of theirs. And one of the first few weeks of year 7, and she had brought in Florence Nightingale. And I was like, oh, keep an eye on you. I've been taught about more able and talented at my PGCE. And she came to me after the lesson, and she said, sir, I think I misunderstood the task. Was it meant to be fictional or non-fictional heroes? And I was like, oh, second tick, year 7, knows what fiction and non-fiction is. And I said, well, I think we'll look at both. Why do you ask? And she said, and I can remember this almost verbatim, she said, it was interesting because I saw it was saw we were going to be starting with this, and I did some reading, and I thought it was really interesting how fictional heroes always seem to reflect the cultural anxieties of the period in which they're written.
Wow.
Like week 2 of year 7. And I said to her, I said, I'm like unbearded, fresh-faced, straight out of uni. I said to her, I looked at my unit of work and went, I'm really sorry, Heather. I don't think much of this you're going to find much of this very difficult. And she gave me, and she was like, I know. Because she had never in her entire school career found anything difficult, because she was thinking and reading at A level, postgraduate level, when she arrived in year 7. And everything I've done, she read literature at Oxford, by the way. She went on to read literature at Oxford, because everything I've done pretty much since then has been for the Heathers.
I love that.
But if you put that behind, because everyone, it comes back to the idea of kids wanting to be intelligent, is everyone wants to be Heather. everyone wants to have that level of articulation. Teachers want that level of articulation. Everyone wants to be as well. Everyone wants to be as well read as Heather. Everyone wants to read something at Oxford like Heather. And so if I teach everything to Heather, everything else gets lifted to that. How am I going to make many of these people like Heather? Lots of them won't make it because lots of them don't have as high expectations as Heather or Heather's parents did.
See, that's the question I was going to ask, is what role does home play in that? Because I don't know if this is a controversial question or not, but I worry that a lot of the conversations that I have and a lot of the times that I end up lowering my expectations are because parents say to me, yeah, but they can't do that. Yeah, but they can't do that. It's too hard for them. Like I've been having a conversation with my ECT recently about managing the behaviour of a student in her class who is quite tricky. And she's had conversations with the parent at home, and the parent has said, but he just finds English too difficult. And then that's the shutdown. And I'm like, well, if that's the conversation that's happening at home, oh, well, you just find it difficult, darling.
Yeah.
You know, that's, you're fighting a losing battle because they almost feel that they've got, well, my mum says it's too hard.
Yeah, 100%. And and I think that's the battle that lots of teachers face is, again, 3 hours a week. You can't offset the attitude given to you by your parents. Are my sisters the academic one, or kind of or my uncle left school with no GCSEs and now he owns a Porsche. Kind of I don't know where that came, but you know what I mean. It's kind of it's that sort of thing. And no, I think you're totally right that it does, but I think the expectation thing I think is a really interesting one at home, because I don't think it's not about behavior again. No. It's about how your attitude to learning and again, Carol Dweck fad, growth mindset. You can't do that yet. You know, he's not very good at English. Well, fortunately, he happens to have me as an English teacher, and we're going to do amazing things together. Yeah.
I believe in your child. I believe that they can. Yeah, and I've built an entire teaching career on that principle, because I always say to students, like when they say I can't do it, and I'm like, yeah, you can. I'm your cheerleader. 100%. I believe 100%. That you can, and I will do everything I can to get you where you need to get, but you've got to work with me. You have to work 100%. With me, and you can't work against me, because then we're not going to succeed. We have to work together on this.
Trust me, I'm an expert.
We've had enough of those.
I know. Right, and again, there's this whole idea of like, you know, what's best for your child is, you know, you have, you know, don't get me wrong, all of the children in our care are very, very valuable, but not as valuable as your own child. And we have experience in raising lots of children in English, in maths and things like that. And so actually, academically, a teacher might be in a better place to know what's best for their child. So if they come in with a note saying they can't do any writing because they've had their nails done for their birthday, that's the situation. You know, it's that kind of thing. It's with not long to go. I don't want anyone to. Every time I've shouted fad, I felt really guilty, because lots of the things I've shouted fad have had incredible impact in my class, and when I use them all the time. Some fads are awesome. Some fads are awesome. Yeah. Sorry, Carol.
And both I mean, even my son. Like yesterday, we were in a supermarket. I won't name the supermarket. We were in a supermarket, and the lady was just talking to him and said, oh, where have you been? And he said, oh, I've been to Ninja. And she said, oh, are you a ninja? And he went, no, I'm not yet, but if I keep going to my classes, I will be. And I was
amazing.
Like, oh,
there we go.
We're like 6 years old. He's already got his little growth mindset in place.
You want to make sure he keeps leaping out from behind a sofa at you, like outside his ninja lessons, rappelling out. Yeah, definitely. Teach them how to make the little throwing stars.
Absolutely. And I think in primary school, I think those high expectations are a little bit easier in primary school because they see them the entire week. And so you've got that consistency of those
Yeah.
expectations that are coming. And I think there's a real there's a gap that starts to emerge once they're moving around at secondary school, and the expectations kind of vary a little bit across the curriculum.
And I think that comes back to how I get our pupils in our school to do flipped learning is because that's the school-wide expectation.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think stuff like primary reading doesn't work unless the school's on board.
Yeah.
And
totally.
the school has incredibly high expectations, because we don't hide behind a range of different excuses. If there's a reason why you think you're not going to be able to do it, approach me, let me know. I'll always give a week for homework, and I'll always say, if you're not going to meet that deadline, you need to get to me before that, because arriving without it is disrespectful.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think it's that open relationship as well, because I do that all the time. I say, be honest with me, treat me like an adult, I will treat you like an adult. You come and tell me in advance. Do not arrive on the day and say I couldn't do it, because that means you've left it till the last minute.
A professional relationship as early as possible.
And it's encouraging that, and I encourage that from day one, because I think that's really, really important. But even though I do that, I still don't feel like I don't have high enough expectations. I think I have lowered my expectations. I think I have kind of let things slide and kind of go, and I think if you feel like that, I feel like that's a good thing, because I feel like that sometimes. Of like, you'll come out of a lesson and think, actually, you know what, I shouldn't have tolerated, that sort of thing. And it's kind of and I don't have a perfectly behaved classroom all the time, and I don't know what a perfectly behaved classroom looks like. But I sort of, it does vary. But I think it's a long-term thing. You are struggling exactly the same way as, nothing is a destination. Is if you're producing full marks pieces of work, well done, let's look at something else. Never enough. Always striving for more. Absolutely. The idea that a piece of creative writing is perfect because it gets 45 on a 2-column rubric is nonsense. It's sort of so I think it's the same with us, is we should constantly be striving for more, constantly striving to change, constantly trying to keep ourselves in that zone of proximal development. Is what if I didn't teach? Why are you teaching Macbeth? Well, because I know all the quotes. I've been campaigning for years to switch to Merchant of Venice. I'm like, we need to shake it up, because 80-90% of schools are doing Macbeth, and as a literature examiner, when I'm going through and a Merchant of Venice pops in, I'm like, oh, okay, something fresh, this is exciting, and it refreshes me in terms of me using that criteria. We've got to vary it up. We've got to think, but people go, oh, but I don't know that one, I'm going to have to learn it. But do you know what? Maybe that's a good thing, because we can then push our students a little bit more.
100%. And also, realistically, you're an English teacher, therefore let's go English scholar. It's Shakespeare. You should be excited. I've taught Gatsby for the first time this year, and it's transformed my love of that book.
It's so funny, because I've never taught it and I don't love it, but I know I can see that if I taught it, I would love it.
It's incredible. It's incredible to sit down with the HL students and to talk about it. It's amazing. You get a total fresh perspective on things when you teach it, and that's what we should be doing. Is we should, if a kid constantly describes the trees as big, how can you keep using the word big? It's the word that I know. all right, I'll tell you what, I'll put huge. You know, and they spelt it HOOJ. You kind of you know, right, stop there. We're gonna do some synonyms for big.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's the secret.
Yeah, simple
But as,
intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. But as teachers, do we do that? Are our expectations, because we love
so
literature, and we love, you know, hopefully most teachers love their subject, and the opportunity to, and again, you know, the idea that kind of you're going to learn brand new texts in all of your spare time as a teacher is obviously wild. But you know, I would say most teachers have a pub quiz knowledge of most of the Shakespeare plays, and you know, potentially, you know, it's only, you know, GCSE level knowledge, that'd be all right for somebody with an English degree. But then over the years, you slowly build it up. I did that. So I did Romeo and Juliet for the first 5-6 years of teaching, and shifted to Macbeth, and spent ages getting my Malcolms and my Rosses and Macduffs all
in the right place,
places, because I didn't know it. But again, didn't know, all English teachers didn't know Macbeth at some point. We all met it for the first time at some point. So, you know.
But we are adaptable as teachers.
Exactly.
I mean, look what happened when we went online learning in COVID. Literally overnight, we learned a whole new way to teach. Not even exaggerated. Literally overnight, Monday to Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, from assemblies telling you to maintain social distance to suddenly at home. It was wild. It was wild.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And everyone adapted, and then everyone adapted back, and nothing's changed.
Yeah, so true. So true. We need to be open and adaptable. We've gone over our hour, Matt. I had a feeling that we probably would, because there's just so much to talk about, and an hour doesn't seem enough, really, does it?
We're half an hour short from my train to Reading, but
and we didn't hit any tunnels this time, which was really
we
nice.
didn't. No, ideal, absolutely. Just me shouting flag instead.
Thank you so much for coming on.
No,
it's been an absolute joy to hear you talk so passionately. You're clearly so good at what you do, and maybe you'll come back. That would be amazing if you would.
Maybe. I'm always doing my best. Always doing my best.
Thank you so much. Well, before we close, I'm just going to have one final word from our sponsors, Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles. I've said that so many times, I should know it by heart, and I don't. So I've lowered my expectations of myself, and I'm going to do a better job next time and know it by heart. So there we go. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and see you again in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.